Hi, I'm Jacqueline.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes. I wish I would have hit record about 15 minutes ago into the Zoom. So of course me and Jacqueline log on, we're talking our shit, as we do, gotta catch up on what's
Like
been
you
going on.
do.
And we're about 25 minutes into the Zoom, and my cat just
hmm
keeps scratching. And so I open the door, and Kevin's like, "Is that her again?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Okay, are you done recording?" And I was like, "I haven't even started yet." He's like, "What have you been doing?" And I'm like, "I've been talking."
Like this is our weekly catch-up time, okay? We only text like, I don't know, 20 back and forth times a day.
I
So
mean,
we have
that's
to like,
barely anything. That's a light day.
right? Like some days, I mean, it's a lot, yeah, a lot more back and forth, but this is our weekly, like, have to catch up on everything. I mean, I haven't seen Courtney in person since we got back from CrimeCon over a week ago, right?
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
right.
so it's been like a week and a half since I've seen Courtney, so we have a
Yeah.
lot to talk about. Okay, so Kevin, you just need to sit down and
And you'll be
just
like
calm
gone all
down.
weekend, and you know how it is when you travel and you just don't text as much.
Yes,
So it's like we gotta get it caught
exactly.
up and gotta, get there, and then we'll push
Have
it
a
again
little,
next week.
yeah, we gotta have a little extra to like last us through the weekend, and then
And
we'll
it's a
be.
lot of it is stuff we can't put on the podcast, and we're not editing that out. No, I'm not going to sit there and edit out 25 minutes. Are you kidding me? I'm not going to hit record
We
till I'm
used
ready.
to. Man, do you remember in the early days when before we had our shit together, like we have our shit together now, but editing used to take so long.
Forever. It took
Just
forever because we couldn't talk, but now we just can't talk and we just leave it in half the time as long as it's not disrespectful.
now we just go with it. We're like, it'll be fine. But I feel like we've also gotten better at the
Yeah.
talking and not messing it up as much.
And I
Most of the
think we've
time,
mentioned this before too. Like we used to just like we would research episodes together and we would just put like bullet points. You know what I
hmm
mean? Like now we basically have a script basically. I mean,
yeah,
we can deviate off of it a little bit, add a little stuff here and there and we do, but like we used to just have like bullet points where it was like Diane Downs born here this date and there was like no sentence. So then you were trying to like
come
say
up
it
with a
and like
sentence
come up with
as
a
you went.
sentence as you
Yeah.
went, which as someone who's not like a public speaker, it just wasn't great.
hmm Yeah, that did not work well for us. I'm glad we have figured out what does work well, and now we kind of have this system that's a lot better where we actually have like full sentences, and like you said, we can. Sometimes we change things up too. Like sometimes, two things aren't written like as naturally as like the other
Mm-hmm.
person would say it. So sometimes we just kind of change the wording around, but it's a lot better than just having like you said, like a single
Yeah.
bullet point, and then you're like, oh, okay, let me put together an entire sentence out of this.
Yeah.
Um,
And you're
and I know
trying to
I
remember it when it's like a shit ton of information. And it's like,
exactly.
we
Yeah.
read like a book and watched like three shows on this. How am I supposed to remember how to say this? Like,
And then when you also like research multiple episodes before you record, like if we have like
yeah.
three in progress and then we're recording one and it's like I've listened to three other stories about other stuff since then. I've not that you forget what it is, but like it's not super fresh in your mind. Like, oh, I watched this show and then I sat down and told my friend about it. It's like, no, maybe I watched into this research 3 weeks ago and now we're
Mm-hmm.
recording. So it's not right there where you can just easily tell a story about it. Like I need a full
Yeah.
script to
And
remind
now
me.
editing is, I don't know if you can say this, I'll admit it. I've caught myself sometimes and I'll be listening and then I go, oh, I did I listen to that? And I will like rewind just a little bit to like listen to highlights and be like, okay, okay.
So many times I like forget because if you guys are new or if you guys forgot, so basically one of us edits the episode and then the other does like a full listen through, just to make sure we didn't miss any like random things that didn't mesh well
Mm-hmm.
together or something happened, so the same person isn't having to listen over and over because then obviously you do tune it out. But there'll be so many times that I'm editing and I like forget that I'm the one editing and not just doing the listen through and I'm like, oh shit, hold
Yes,
on. I'm
literally. And
like,
then
wait, I actually
sometimes
have
I'm
to pay
like,
attention.
Jacqueline will tell me if it's wrong. She'll tell me
And
if it's
that's why we
wrong.
have the backup. So that way,
Mm-hmm.
if something happens, we can do that. Or before we went to CrimeCon, I had to edit that episode the night before we left. And I was trying to pack and do this and that. So I'm like editing at the same time. But then I would hear something and I thought I could like pause my AirPods like how you normally pause
Oh, with
them
like
with
GarageBand.
GarageBand, and you cannot. That just turns on Siri. So then I had to like sprint across the house to my computer to
Oh my
pause it, back
God.
up to
Okay.
edit, and then go
I've
back to what
not
I was
done
doing.
that before. It's at least by me, but I'll notice like I'll just be sitting there and like Kevin will say something to me and I'm like, oh, hold on, pause it. And he's like, you're still editing? I was like, yeah.
You're like,
Yeah.
apparently, I don't know.
Don't know what just
Yeah,
happened, but
that was the first time I edited while like doing other stuff, but apparently it turned out okay. So no one has said
yeah.
anything different. So also I don't know how long this intro has been because we have been
It's
on
been
for
way
so
too fucking
long,
long. It's been way too
but
fucking
I
long.
feel like it's been a
It's
lot. So
update
we need to
time.
get into our updates and get going. Yes. We also didn't discuss who was going to do what update.
You go first.
Okay. So I'm sure at this point we are all familiar. If not, let me tell you a little bit about Gypsy Rose Blanchard. So she did plead guilty to murdering her mother, Claudine Dee Dee Blanchard, in 2016. And she was sentenced to 10 years. At this point, she has served 85% of her sentence, and she was just granted parole. So again, if you're not familiar with this case, her mother... she had like a Munchausen by
Munchausen by
proxy.
proxy. Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't remember if she like I guess she did actively poison her. Like,
I mean, basically, yeah, like pulled all her
yeah,
teeth, like took her to like Disney World on what is that program called?
the Make-A-Wish.
Yeah, like stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Like
We
severely abused her entire
hmm
life, like made her think she was dying, made everyone else think that she was dying. And then she did play a role in the murder of her mother. Again, she has served most of her sentence at this point, and she will be out on parole soon.
Yep. And that's one I think in the true crime community, a lot of people are in between on like her
Mm-hmm.
sentence. So basically, also the reason she was only sentenced to 10 years and could do a plea deal is because she did meet a boyfriend, and the boyfriend did come
Mm-hmm.
murder Dee Dee technically.
Yeah.
But obviously, Gypsy Rose played a role in kind of
Mm-hmm.
all of that. I mean, he would not
Facilitating.
be
Yeah.
there, you know. But a lot of people are like, oh, well, you know, she was abused for so long. Like, should she be spending, it's dicey that one. But I feel like, I mean, by the time she gets out, 85% of her sentence served. I think she did her time. I personally don't think she's a danger to
Mm-hmm.
society. I think this was because she wanted to break free of her mother and she didn't know any other way how.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Because she was
again,
how old when this happened? I'll look it up.
and when you look it up, it is insane that when you type in Gypsy Rose Blanchard, the first pictures that come up are from the Hulu show.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Because also with like her abuse too, I'm like, did that delay her mental like function too? Like with all this abuse, like
Yeah, I feel like it definitely had to. I mean, clearly, like, that would contribute to some mental health issues, you know? Okay, so I guess there's like her mom like lied to her about her age, so it's kind of
so
difficult
she
to
doesn't
find
know
like
how
the
old she
exact.
is.
So this says that she was told that she was born in 93 and then later 95, but that she was actually born in 91.
Okay.
It
So she
says
would
that
have been
her mom forged a birth certificate to lessen her daughter's age, to like say she was younger than she really was. So she's
okay.
around 30 at this time. So she was around 20 when this happened. So not sure the exact age. I
Yeah.
apologize if someone listening knows and is screaming at their phone right now because I know we've all been there. But obviously still very young, and especially to be in the mental state that she was in because of the abuse that she endured her entire life. Like there's a lot that kind of goes into that, you know?
There's a lot there. It'll be interesting to see once she gets out. Does
Mm-hmm.
she like play into the I'm Gypsy Rose? Does she change her name, try to live
Yeah.
a quiet life? What's she gonna do once she gets out? So
Yeah,
that'll
I
be
will be interested
interesting.
to see that too. Also, speaking of us getting better at editing, supposedly, I also did not mute myself the whole time I was clacking away on my keyboard. So I'm sorry, Courtney, that you have to edit that out.
That's okay. If there's I just make sure whenever you're doing that, I try not to talk. So that way I'm like, there's a big gap, cut.
Smart. Perfect.
Because sometimes whenever we start laughing and talking, it's like, I don't know what's what. Here we go. Got it.
Yes.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
so our other update is Dwayne Kathy D, I hope that's right, sorry guy, Davis has been a long suspect in the 1996 murder of Tupac Shakur. So Davis wasn't the gunman. Like, no one believes he is the one who shot the gun, but he is
Mhm.
believed to be like the ringleader. He's the one who ordered it to be done. He called the shots, organized the plan. He's even admitted, like in an interview and like in his book, he like provided the gun that was used in the
Mhm.
drive-by shooting. So like very much a part of it. He's just not the one who pulled the trigger, basically. And he's one of four suspects and the only one still alive. So he was officially arrested, and he's being charged with one count of murder with a deadly weapon. And the grand jury did say that they could put like a criminal gang enhancement on it, and that could add 20 years to his sentence if he's convicted.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's kind of crazy. This like Tupac, I mean, it's been almost 30 years, and now
Mhm.
someone's finally getting arrested for his murder.
Yeah, it
Unless
is
you
pretty
believe he
wild.
wasn't murdered and he's on an island somewhere, and then
Mm, that's true.
then
Then
you're
what?
weird.
We did also do an episode on Tupac way back when.
Mm-hmm.
So if you guys have not listened to that, sorry about the audio quality. I'm apologizing in advance because I know that was quite a while ago. So I'm sure it sounds a lot better now than it did then. But,
Yeah,
check that out too.
yeah, I'm sure it does. All right. And also, before we get into this episode, we do have a shout out because we have a new Patreon. It is the most exciting
Yay!
week. It happened just today, right before a few hours before we recorded this. So, Christina, thank you so much for joining. I've already sent you a message and thanked you. Your pin and sticker will be in the mail shortly. So, I do know Christina, and it's just super exciting that she came and joined the Patreon.
Yes, thank you so much, Christina. We really appreciate your support and we hope you enjoy all of the lovely perks and bonus episodes and all that fun stuff we have over on Patreon.
Yeah. All right. Now, this one is a doozy. So we're going to go ahead
Yep.
and get into it. So, our resources this week are a People Magazine Investigates episode. It's season 7, episode 7, Who Killed Our Girls? The book Who Killed These Girls by Beverly Jackson, a CBS article, and like the University of Michigan Law website, one of their articles. So, Austin, Texas was a smaller town in the 80s and 90s. It's obviously since grown, but at the time, it still kind of had more of a small town vibe. And this is why the murder of 4 teenage girls completely stunned the community in 1991. So Eliza Thomas was very social and had a lot of friends. She was always going out with a big group of people on Friday night. And in 1991, she was a 17-year-old high school senior, and she loved makeup and clothes. And she also really loved like fixing up cars. So like her dad would help teach her about car repair. So she loved, you know, fixing cars, messing with cars, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a VW Carmen Gia. I know I probably said that wrong. I'm so sorry, car people. But she had one and she really loved it. She loved animals, and her dream was to be a veterinarian. And her parents, James and Maria, had divorced in 1981. So they shared custody until Eliza was 14, and then they let her choose who to live with. So she lived with her father until 1991, and then she chose to go live with her mother. I didn't see anything about like a disagreement or anything that occurred to like make that happen. Just kind of, she ended up moving in with her mom. She also had a sister who was 4 years younger, Sonora. So she transferred to Lanier High School after her sophomore year and enrolled in their Future Farmers of America, or FFA, program. I guess if you don't live in the South, I might explain this a little bit. That is very common at high schools, and it's just a high school group association where they're called Future Farmers of America, and they just get together and talk about farming and talk about animals and talk about agriculture, all of that kind of stuff. My dad was a part of it way back in whenever he went to high school.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I do listen to a podcast, these girls that live in like not like upstate New York, but like Long Island area. And there was something going on that they were talking about like 4-H, and they had no clue like what 4-H was. And I was like, oh, is that like a regional thing? So let us
Yeah.
know if you guys are familiar with 4-H or if that's just a Southern thing.
Same with Future Farmers of America. Like,
Yeah.
is that a Southern thing or is that everywhere?
I mean, I feel like at least like the South and the Midwest, right? Like surely the
Where
Midwest has
like
like
farming
FFA and
people are.
4-H.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like New
Let us know.
England, like California, West Coast, stuff like that. Like let
Hmm.
us know.
Yeah.
She was also friends with the Harbison sisters, 17-year-old Jennifer and 15-year-old Sarah. And Jennifer and Sarah were also in the FFA. So Jennifer and Sarah lived with their mother, Barbara, and stepfather, Frank Sirachi, in a big brick house in a secluded suburban development in Northwest Austin. So Jennifer did have a boyfriend, Sammy Buchanan, and they've been dating for a few weeks, and he lived nearby in an apartment complex with his mother. Jennifer was on the track team, and she worked with Eliza at the local yogurt store called I Can't Believe It's Yogurt, which is just a great name for a yogurt store.
That is a great name.
So Jennifer got the job to help make payments on a truck her dad, Mike, had helped her buy. So she started working there after Eliza talked about it being a good job. So the yogurt shop was like the local community, like ice cream store. So her friends would come by all the time and hang out. The owners had a few rules, but overall it was just like an easy job. Like you didn't have to cook, you didn't have to waitress, and the employees were mostly on their own. Like if you're closing, it's mostly just you, one other person in the store, kind of free reign to just kind of do whatever you want.
Hmm.
Sarah Harbison also attended Lanier High School. She was a sophomore and she played basketball and volleyball. And she also had a boyfriend, Mike McCathern. So on December 6, 1991, Eliza and Jennifer went to work the closing shift. Sarah asked her mother if she could go too, and she wanted to invite her best friend, Amy Ayers, who was 13, and she was still in junior high. So Sarah and Amy didn't get to see each other much since they were in different schools. Amy's in junior high while Sarah's in high school. So they would try to like hang out as much as they could. Amy was more private and reserved. She loved horses and she'd ridden horses since she was 3. She'd often wear a cowboy hat to school. And sometimes she would take 2 of her pigs for a walk, just kind of walk her pigs down the street.
I love that.
Yeah. She also enjoyed doing needlepoint, and she also wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. And even though she was only in 8th grade, she was given permission to join the FFA at the high school. So Sarah and Amy got permission, and Jennifer planned on driving everyone home for a sleepover at the Harbisons when they were finished at work. So Eliza called her sister Sonora, who was 13 at this time, to see if she wanted to come, but their dad was pretty strict on like not leaving the house without his permission. And so since he wasn't home, Sonora decided not to go. She was like, that is dad's rule. It's a strict rule. I'm not going to break it.
Yeah.
So she chose not to go. So Jennifer dropped Sarah and Amy off at the mall before her shift, and at around 9 p.m., she went back and picked them up. And back at the yogurt shop, Sarah and Amy walked to Mr. Gaddy's to get pizza before it closed at 10. Then at 11:47 p.m., an Austin police officer was on patrol and passed the strip mall that the yogurt shop was in and noticed a fire. So he called dispatch, and Sergeant John Winston Jones was the only homicide cop on the street that night. So he headed that way. Again, at this point, Austin's kind of a small town. Only had one homicide cop on the street for a Friday night. Like,
yeah.
And he had a reporter and videographer from KTBC TV, which is a local CBS affiliate, with him as well. So they were working on a series on homicides in Texas and doing kind of like a ride-along type of thing. And when they arrived at the scene, heavy smoke was visible, and it looked like it was coming from the backside of the yogurt shop. So the back storage room was completely blacked out with smoke, and it only took a few minutes to get the fire under control. But then the firefighters soon saw the 4 bodies. So 3 of the girls were kind of like stacked on top of each other, like all kind of in the same like little spot. And then the 4th girl was about 10 feet away. So they were pretty shocked, but even more shocking, the girls had been shot and were naked. So they're like, this is not just they're passed out from smoke inhalations. Something happened before this fire.
Yeah.
And this part is a little graphic, so I understand if you want to hit that 15-second, but the fire had split their thighs and their arms, obvious signs of like foul play. And since they were nude, investigators also believed they could have been sexually assaulted. So investigators reach out to the Texas Department of Public Safety to help collect evidence at the scene. No weapons were found, but they did find a .380 round. And after all 4 bodies are swabbed at the scene, they're released to the medical examiner. So the police speak to the manager of the yogurt shop, and that's when they discover that Eliza Thomas and Jennifer Harbison were working that night. And as we said, Eliza's parents were divorced and Sonora was with her dad. So it was around 1 a.m. when the cops came to his house and told her father they believe Eliza was one of the victims, but they couldn't be sure until the autopsy was complete. I mean, they're just going on the fact that they're like, she was supposed to be here that night.
Yeah.
They then drove to Eliza's mother's house to tell her. And then at the Harbison house, their mother, Barbara, opened the door and was asked about her daughters. And she's like, yeah, they're upstairs asleep. Like they were coming back for a sleepover. They're upstairs asleep. Then when she checks the bedrooms, she sees none of the girls are home, including Amy. So that's when they went to Amy's house to see if she was there. So they're kind of slowly putting together the 4 girls who were likely in this yogurt shop.
Mm-hmm.
So investigators worked through the night to try and figure out what happened. So they thought robbery could have been the motive. $540, which is about $1,200 today, was taken from the cash register, which is a significant amount of money. And the placement of the cleaning supplies indicated they were likely in the middle of their closing procedure when they were interrupted. The 4 girls were likely led into the storage room. They believe that they were told to take off their clothes, kind of maybe forced to kneel. They were gagged and tied up with their own underwear. And once they'd been tied up, the perpetrator could have just completed the robbery and left, if that was their full motive. However, that isn't what happened. It's possible maybe the perpetrator panicked, shot the girls, and then it looks like the perpetrator set the place on fire to probably cover up evidence. It was likely started with the napkins and paper products that were in the storage room, but there was no accelerant. So there was no gas used, no anything like that to accelerate the fire.
Mm-hmm.
So dental records did confirm what investigators thought, and the victims are identified as Eliza, Jennifer, Sarah, and Amy. So the swab results come back and indicated sexual assault, and DNA from multiple males is discovered on the swab from Jennifer, Sarah, and Amy, but not Eliza. So at this point, they do believe there has to be at least 2 perpetrators, especially 2 to take on 4 girls. And have this whole scenario of forcing them in the back room, forcing them to undress, tying them up. Likely one person, that'd be hard to control all 4 girls with one person.
Mm-hmm.
So DNA is still very new at this point. It is 1991. So, and there was destruction from the fire and the water putting it out. At the time, the firefighters did not know this was a crime scene. So obviously the water putting out the fire had damaged some of the evidence. And all they can determine at this time is that the profiles were male. That's all they can tell. So police examined the autopsy results closely to understand what happened in those final moments. So they were all shot in the head with a .22 caliber gun, and the bodies were all stacked together. It does appear Amy had gotten away and crawled about 10 feet or so, and then she was shot a second time with a different caliber gun, which was the .380. And they were dead before the fire started. They believe the fire started approximately 11:42 p.m. So there was one piece of evidence that did survive that night and could be a huge clue, and that was the cash register tape that had the transactions of the night. And the last one occurred at 11:03 p.m. So they're like, okay, we got to find out who's this final customer that night, who is left in the yogurt shop right before this happens. So they went on TV and asked anyone who was there that night to come forward, and quite a few people did. Police got in touch with everyone who paid with a credit card, and then dozens other came forward who'd paid cash. So everyone's coming forward who was basically in the yogurt shop that night. They took statements from everyone, and one couple that had purchased frozen yogurt around 10:45 p.m. told cops about 2 males they'd seen in the shop. So the witness said the 2 men were seated behind them. They were kind of hunched over and talking quietly, and they were still there when they left. Another customer described the boys as teenagers. They were white and maybe between 5'4" and 5'7". They were wearing like puffy vests and jackets, boots and jeans, and one was thinner and one was a little bit heavier. So one customer, Lucella Jones, said she come in alone earlier and noticed the boys as well. She said she didn't remember seeing anything at their table, like indicating they were eating. And she kind of got this like odd feeling about these boys. And she was wondering if she should ask the girls if they were okay, since it's just them by themselves. But she said Eliza and Jennifer were like chatting happily, like they didn't seem like they were uncomfortable. So she was like, okay, they're fine. Like, I'm just going to push my concerns aside. You know, you're like, is this something? But maybe they know them. Like, you kind of just brush it aside.
Yeah. And two, sometimes like you don't want to be that person who like makes something out of nothing. You know, you're like, oh, like, I think this is a huge deal. And the girls are just like, what are you talking about? It's fine. Or maybe we even know them or, you know, whatever. So it's completely understandable that you would kind of maybe have that thought and then be like, okay, I don't need to get in the middle of this. It's probably fine.
Because that happened with me one time when I worked at the library. It was like there was this guy in there, and like he was a Black man, and he was totally fine, totally respectful. He was just like sitting at a table, and then like this older woman come in. She was like, "Are you okay here by yourself?" And was like pointing at him, and I'm like, "I'm fine." You know what I mean? Because then you're just like, "Why are you being like this?" Like, so I understand like if you're like seeing them just talking, you're like, "Okay, I'm not going to say anything. Like, I'm not going to be that person who's making them." Start questioning stuff. Like if they're fine, like we're fine.
Yeah.
And several customers also talked about seeing a Latino man inside a light colored American car, like just kind of sitting outside, just kind of sitting there. And they were able to make a composite sketch. So they did try to look into this lead as well, of like who's this guy who's just like sitting out there by himself for no reason. So a funeral service was held for the four girls, and the funeral was huge, and 1,000 people attended. Jennifer, Sarah, and Amy were buried side by side, and Maria Thomas had trouble deciding where to bury Eliza and eventually buried her somewhere else. So she later did wish to have her move closer, but that was never actually done. And then on Amy's birthday, her middle school planted a 15-foot crepe myrtle in her memory. And the families of the girls also eventually erected a memorial to their daughters in the parking lot. It was made of Austin pinkstone and set under a scrub oak and read, "In loving memory of Amy Ayers, Jennifer Harbison, Sarah Harbison, and Eliza Thomas, forever in our hearts." So Bryce Foods is the owner company of the yogurt shop. They did cover the full cost of the funerals, and they also set up a $25,000 reward for evidence leading to a conviction. So the Austin police set up a tip line for the murders, and the story makes national news, and they were up to about 2,500 tips a week. So they're getting a lot of tips into this tip line.
Yeah, and that's a lot to try to like sort through and figure out what's what and what's legitimate and what's someone like we've seen before just making up stuff for no reason, and what's someone that thinks it could be something but it turns out to be nothing, and just so much time and manpower going into following up on all of those leads.
Yeah. And a billboard did go up with the girls' pictures with bold red letters saying who killed these girls, and it stated the $25,000 reward and asked for any information. Then on December 14th, a week after the murders, they thought there was a break in the case. So a young man named Maurice Pierce was at the North Cross Mall when he showed someone he had a gun. So the person he showed it to got in touch with like the security guard and was like, this guy's just whipping his gun out over here. So the security guard like took the gun from him, and Maurice was only 17 years old. So Austin police had let everyone in the community know they were looking for a .380 and a .22, and Maurice had a .22. So they're like, okay, this kid has a gun. Let's just look into it. So Maurice is taken to the juvenile center, and police start interviewing him and learn he was driving around with 3 of his buddies the night of the 6th. They were Forrest Wellborn, Robert Springsteen, and Michael Scott. So Robert, Michael, and Maurice are all 17 and attend McCallum High School with 15-year-old Forrest. And Robert had only been in Austin for 4 months. He'd lived in West Virginia, but moved to Austin to live with his dad after not getting along with his stepdad. And he was known for having a quick temper. And in West Virginia, he'd been sent to alternative school. And it was actually suggested in Austin as well, because he was like kind of already acting out. But the McCallum principal overrode it.
So Robert was living in one of his father's condos, and he agreed to let Michael Scott move in with him. The only stipulation was that if they dropped out of school, they had to get jobs. So they would just drink, smoke pot, take acid, and psilocybin mushrooms, which I hope is pronounced correctly. I looked it up earlier, but my brain already forgot it, of course. But, mushrooms.
Psilocybin? Is that it? Is that what you said?
Something like that.
Something like that. Mushrooms.
You guys know the mushrooms.
Yeah.
So Michael had moved around a lot as a kid, and most of his school years he lived in Austin, and he did struggle with severe dyslexia. In 1989, he made the freshman football team, joined the drama department, and played the viola in the school orchestra. And by his sophomore year, his parents divorced and his mother was really struggling. He ended up quitting football and the drama department, and Mike and Robert both skipped school frequently. So Forrest was known as being quiet at school. He was in the Lamar Middle School Orchestra playing the stand-up bass, and his story was similar to Robert and Michael with having divorced parents, like moving between the parents. His mother currently lived in Lockhart, which was about 20 miles from Austin, and Forrest was living with his father in Austin. Many of his teachers commented on his lack of attention in class. He would frequently sit in class and sketch, and he did really admire Maurice. So Rob once said that Forrest would do anything Maurice told him to. Forrest would drink frequently, and he was also good at fixing cars. So Maurice cared about his car more than anything. He just kept it immaculate, and he was also the only one of the four boys who had been in serious trouble before. So in 1990, when he was 15 years old, he was picked up for unauthorized use of a motor vehicle twice. So he took one car where the owner had left the key in the ignition, and he had also stolen his father's car and drove it to Houston. That same year, he was also suspended from school for fighting, having a knife, and stealing fire extinguishers, which
that is like such a teenage
thing to do.
Such a teenage boy like prank. Like, I'm gonna steal this fire extinguisher. Like, why?
Yeah.
It's like pulling the fire alarm when they're like, it's so funny. And it's like, is it though? Is it?
Yeah. Like, now we all got to go out in the cold and the rain and the heat, whatever it is, So in 1991, he'd been charged with criminal trespass when he jumped the fence of an apartment complex with a knife. He was also charged for possession of a stereo that was believed to be stolen and for criminal trespass in a schoolyard after threatening to cause bodily harm to a student, and he was also charged with assault. So he's got a few things going on his record when police start looking into him. So police ask Maurice about the murders, and he starts confessing. So Maurice indicated that he and his three friends went into the yogurt shop and committed the robbery and homicide and then started the fire. But he said he was only the driver. So police talked to Robert and Michael, and they're like, no, we're not involved. We didn't have anything to do with this. They said that they had been at the mall and saw the fire trucks. And they said that at some point, Maurice went to a car lot and stole a car. And then the four of them set off to San Antonio on a joyride in the stolen car. So Mike and Robert do put themselves near the crime scene. So they send Maurice's firearm in for ballistics testing, and then they turn to focus on Forrest. So they put a wire on Maurice and had him go talk to Forrest to try to get him to talk about the crime. And Maurice and Forrest went to a laundromat known as Washateria. And Maurice tried to get Forrest to talk about what happened that night, but Forrest just seems confused about what he's talking about. He's going along with the conversation, but he's not, confessing to the murder or anything. And it's obvious that he had nothing to do with it. He just isn't following this conversation, doesn't know what's going on.
He's like, yeah, saw the story on the news. Yeah, saw the billboard. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't know what you're talking about.
What does that have to do with me? Yeah. So because the DNA from the crime scene is incomplete, they can't test it against the boy's DNA to see if it's a match. So police go back to the witness who saw the two boys sitting at the yogurt shop that night. They show her like a 6-pack of photos, and one of them catches her eye, and she points out Maurice and says that it resembles the guy that she saw that night. However, the ballistics testing comes back and says that Maurice's gun does not match the gun that was used at the crime scene. So in the fall of 1992, almost a year after the murders, a tip comes in from within the Austin Police Department. So they have a possible match for the composite sketch of the man seen sitting in the car outside the yogurt shop. The Austin PD Sex Crimes Unit said that they had a sketch from another crime that looked just like that one. And they had identified the man as Alberto Cortez, and he was a suspect in an aggravated sexual assault. He had also been arrested in Mexico and confessed to Mexican authorities that he committed the yogurt shop murders. The problem was that Alberto talked about using a .38 caliber gun and pouring white gas all over the place and setting it on fire. So obviously the caliber of the gun was wrong, and like Courtney mentioned, there was no accelerant used in this fire. And 2 days later, he recanted and said that he was coerced into confessing. So,
which is, yeah, just crazy. It's like you have these 4 boys where one of them is like confessing, and then you have this one where he's confessing and recanting, and it's just like, why is everyone confessing and then recanting?
Yeah,
who did it?
What are y'all doing in your interviews here? Which we'll get into, but
yeah, we'll definitely get into that.
Yeah. So years start to pass with no more leads, and every year they would publish a story in the newspaper about where the case stood, but the case had gone cold, unfortunately. On August 31st, 1999, the FBI had developed a new criminal profile to help detectives find new suspects in the case. So the profile included the following description. They said that the perpetrators were young and disorganized. They would have left town after the killings. And this is, again, reminding them a lot of Maurice, Michael, Robert, and Forrest. And since being investigated 8 years ago, Maurice has been working at a warehouse in Texas, and he did have a 7-year-old daughter at that time. Forrest had opened an auto repair business. So Michael was married and working repair jobs, and Robert had moved to West Virginia, gotten married, and was the manager of a McDonald's. So again, this is 8 years after the murders. They've all kind of like moved on with their lives. And all 4 of them were brought in and questioned again. And police got nowhere with Maurice, Robert, and Forrest, but Michael's interrogation ends up with him confessing. So Michael was questioned for about 22 hours total, which is clearly a very long time.
Long time.
And his testimony began with, "I don't know what you guys are talking about." But then finally, after police continually ask him if he did something, he eventually says, like, "Yes, I did that." So like, "Did you do this one thing?" And then eventually, again, hours later, he's like, "Yes, I did that." And after Michael confesses, they use his confession against Robert, who then also confesses. And soon all 4 of the men are arrested. So police are continuing to try and get a confession from Maurice and Forrest again keeps saying that he had nothing to do with it. He also had a lawyer who advised him as well, and they did end up not prosecuting him because they had no evidence. Maurice was also questioned, but they had no evidence connecting him either. And after 3.5 years of trying to find evidence that links the 4 men to the case, police just have nothing. The Austin DA dismisses the charges against Forrest and Maurice, but Robert and Michael were tried in a capital case with the potential for the death penalty.
Which I'm like, you have 4 suspects and you have no evidence. So you dismiss 2 of them and you just go on with the other 2. I'm like,
yep. Because, and their whole theory is that the 4 of them did it together. But yet, it's not sending off signals to your brain here that if you have no evidence and these 2 have not confessed, well, we can still take these 2. And it's like, that's not quite how this works.
Yeah.
So Robert was the first one who went to trial in 2001. And again, the only evidence against him was his confession, which he did recant. So he said that his confession was coerced and he did not commit these crimes. However, his confession and Michael's statements were allowed into the trial. So Robert Springsteen was found guilty and given the death penalty, and Michael was then tried. So his trial started in September of 2002. Michael also recanted and said his confession was coerced, and he was interviewed for 5 days overall. They did use the read technique. So basically, they're like saying, like, "We know you did this," and like painting the picture, like giving him like the details that he needs. And they just kept pushing him like over the next 5 days. And in the interview, you can see how they're like leading him to the answers. So for example, they're like, oh, like, what did you tie them up with? And he just like keeps saying random things that's not correct. And they're like, no, they're like, think about something white. And he's like, napkins. And they're like, no. And then finally he says their clothes. And they're like, yes, perfect. So, yep, you tied them up with their clothes. So what are they now? And he's like, naked. And so they're like, see, you tied them up and they're naked. And you did that all on your own. And we had nothing to do with you saying that.
I really encourage people to go watch that tape. They showed it in the episode. It is just crazy. And I'm pretty sure that was shown to the jury too.
Wow.
Just to keep that in mind. But I mean, it was seriously like those were the exact, like, oh my, I tried to pull the exact words where they're like, what'd you tie him up with? And he's like, I don't know, napkins. No. Like this, yeah. Okay. Like, and at that point, like, you've been interviewed so long, you're like, I'm just gonna say whatever you want me to say at this point. Like,
yeah, I mean, sleep deprivation is serious and legit. And if like you literally just can't even think and you're just like, yeah, I'll say whatever to just get out of here, to go sleep, to go eat, get a drink, whatever. Like,
and all four of these boys were doing like drinking and drugs and everything when their brains were still developing. So I'm not saying that they have a low IQ or anything like that, but I mean, anybody. I mean, you sit me down before I knew all of this and someone just keeps telling me to say something, I might just fucking say it. And a lot of people say that, where they're like, I'll just say it in there so that I can go home and then I'll get a lawyer who'll prove all I said was wrong because the evidence will prove that.
Yep. So his defense counters Michael's statement, and they're trying to show how his confession and the crime scene just don't match up. But unfortunately, this confession was enough, even though, again, that's all they had. And Michael Scott was found guilty and was sentenced to life in prison. And like the people of Austin are like, finally, like, justice being served. Someone's finally going to pay for these crimes, even though things don't exactly line up. But they're like, but we finally have justice, we feel like. So we're happy about it.
And like people, less so now that we're all seeing the corruption, but people trust like a jury trial. They're like, how many is it? 10, 12, 10?
12, yeah.
12. Lord. How can 12 people all agree that he's guilty if he's not guilty? You know, like, you just trust the system is going to work. But now, I mean, a lot of people are seeing it doesn't, but.
Yeah. And where you mentioned that his interview tape was shown to the jury, I feel like even then, like, you can watch it and not see it the same way that we do now because you don't really have that background understanding. You know what I mean? Like, you like, why would someone say they did something that they didn't do? Like, especially
this was
something
before
as serious
Making
as this.
a Murderer, when people saw Brendan Dassey's forced confession and were like, holy shit, there's something fucked up with this. Like, before then, people are like, the police just had to force it out of him. He was trying to deny it until they got him there. You know what I'm saying? Like,
because I think so many people just didn't, and maybe some still don't, like, understand the psychology of confessing to something that you didn't do, like, through a coercion, which we have a whole Patreon episode on. Plug. But
be like Christina, go sign up.
I know, right? If you watch something like this, and in your brain, sitting here, well rested, fed, watching your documentary on TV, whatever, and you're just like, who would sit there and say they committed a murder they didn't do? It makes no sense. No, it doesn't make sense. But like, the brain doesn't always make sense. And being in those situations, I mean, it's the same thing as like torture situations where, like, you know, militaries will like hold people hostage and waterboard them and ask them questions. And it's the same kind of thing, you know? Anyway. So Robert's case was appealed automatically, and Michael's lawyers filed an appeal as well. So the attorneys for both men are arguing that their Sixth Amendment rights were violated because co-conspirators' confessions were allowed in the case. So in 2004, the Supreme Court at the time said that any comments made to the police about co-defendants were unreliable and inadmissible. Because generally speaking, a co-defendant is trying to like make an admission, but put most of the guilt on the other party. So they're like, okay, yeah, I'll say I was part of it, but like, this guy did most of it. And so that's not really.
It's like when Maurice was confessing and he's like, yeah, we went in there, we did the robbery and the murder. I was only the driver.
Yeah.
That's all I did.
Yeah, so you're like, you have to think about how reliable that is. So in 2006, the convictions were reversed and the cases were sent back for a new trial. So the judge told the DA that they had to come up with a new case and they could not use the confessions. So for the next 3.5 years, while Michael and Robert remain in prison, prosecutors delay motions for a new trial, which is just...
They have no evidence and they still won't release them.
Your convictions were reversed. You're waiting on a new trial and you still just have to wait.
For
Despite all
3.5
these delayed
years.
motions. Yeah.
Ugh.
So finally, in March of 2008, there is a new revelation due to the advancement of DNA technology. So like Courtney mentioned, the male DNA profiles have always been present on the vaginal swabs, but it wasn't until the DNA advancements in 2008 that police are able to retest these swabs. So of the 2 incomplete profiles they had in 1991, one of them now comes back as a complete DNA profile. So the police took DNA samples from Robert, Michael, Maurice, and Forrest, but the results said they were not a match. So they excluded all 4 men from this DNA sample.
Yeah.
So none of these 4 men who had been arrested and been through all of this have been involved. And Robert and Michael were released on bond on June 24th, 2009, and their charges were officially dismissed on October 28th, 2009, which again is a long time after all of
I know.
this.
I'm like, how do you not dismiss these immediately? But okay.
Yeah. So they run the DNA through CODIS, but there's not a match. And the case is cold again, and there are no suspects. So who were these 2 men that were seen in the yogurt shop that night? Every single customer from that night came forward to make a statement except those 2 men. Unfortunately, Eliza's mom did die in 2015, and she wants people to keep talking about what happened to her and trying to find out who did this to them.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott sued the state of Texas for compensation in state and federal courts for being wrongfully convicted, but all of their claims were denied. In Robert Springsteen's case, they ruled that it was because he was not granted relief based on actual innocence. Okay. Mm-hmm. So he would have been eligible for $700,000 for wrongful incarceration, but we guess because the reversals on their convictions came from a constitutional violation because of the confessions, that's why. But the DNA results also came in while they were in prison waiting for a new trial. So how is that not proof of actual innocence?
I think it's murky. It's a loophole. It is definitely a fucked up loophole they're using, but they're like, well, the reason your conviction was reversed is because of your constitutional violation, but not because of the DNA results, technically. But
like you said, they were still, or like I said, you wrote, but they were still in prison at the time that all the DNA stuff happened. It's not like, oh, I've been out for years and years. So they're like, yeah, well, water under the bridge. It's like, no, I was still there.
It's so fucked up.
Yeah. Very, very wrong. Again, they were wrongfully convicted and imprisoned for years, and it's just super sad that they were not able to receive this compensation that they deserve for what they went through. So John Jones retired from the Austin Police Department years ago, but he still has copies of case files and tries to regularly review them. He says it still haunts them and that they do want it solved. Again, there is DNA in this case. We just have to find a match and figure out who it belongs to. Which, genealogy DNA is helping to solve cases like this every single day. So
please go put your DNA into GEDmatch. Because you never know what your 5th cousin did. I don't know if they can go that far, but maybe. Just please do that. And then I also wonder, Paul Hulse said at CrimeCon, test it again. Who knows what might come up if we test it again.
Yeah, because he did mention just how far DNA has come even in the last 5 to 10 years. You think oh, well, you had 90s DNA and then you have 2000s DNA. And it's no, just in the last few years, there's been enough advancements. And they're also now able to test such small pieces too, versus before you had to have a large sample. So once you used it, you used it and that was it. And now it's oh no, they can get little bits left to pull these profiles now. So there is a $100,000 reward for any information that leads to an arrest.
Yeah, and if you have any information whatsoever about this case, anything, please call the Austin Police Department at 512-974-2000 or 2000.
And that is the murder of Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison, Sarah Harbison, and Amy Ayers. Just so tragic. These four just vibrant, beautiful young women just working in a yogurt shop, and just an absolutely tragic and horrific death. And then
and also the wrongful convictions of Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott. Because also they were kind of talking about when they were trying to get like their wrongful conviction like money, their reputations have been tarnished permanently. And now you have a 5-6 year gap on your resume, and you have no money that you haven't been making for the last 5 or 6 years. Just
that's the thing. It's like it's so much more than just, because I feel like a lot of people like see a number like that and they're like, oh, like I didn't make 700,000 in this many years. Why should you get that just for being in prison? And it's like, okay, yeah, but they didn't make that money. They
please
weren't
go
able
try to live in prison.
Exactly.
Please go try to live in prison for that long.
Yeah, like you deserve compensation for like your pain and suffering, first of all, but then also, like you said, imagining the income that you lost while you were in there, the like income, like growth potential that you've lost, because most people like get raises from year to year, you get promotions, you grow in your career and make more money. And if you, like you said, have nothing to show for those years on your resume, you're not able to continue growing like that. You haven't been able to invest any money in your retirement because you didn't have income coming in. Like all of those things that play into that large number that you see that they deserve for the wrongful convictions that happened to them.
Yeah, and it's like people all the time, you get into a car accident and then you go sue for what, like some people sue for like $1 million, and it's like that wasn't your medical bills and your car, like you're just trying to get money. Not that you maybe don't deserve it if it's really bad, but I'm saying like it's not gonna, like some places do it where it's like the average salary is what you'd get per year, but it's like, hey, maybe in Austin, Texas, that is the average salary for 7 years, like,
right? Yeah,
it's a big city now. Like,
so in the stuff that you watched and read, did anyone try to say that like, oh, because there was another incomplete DNA profile, like maybe that could have belonged to like one of these 4 men, but they like were involved with someone else? Like, did anyone try to make that argument?
Not that I saw.
Okay.
Because it is determined that the 4 of them were together that night. So I think they believe like they do have an alibi, even if it's each other. So I think that's kind of the thing. There's also, I got kind of confused in the book. In the book, there was some talk about the fact that maybe the carjacking and the driving to San Antonio happened the Saturday night versus the Friday night, saying that maybe they weren't even in the area Friday night like they believed. I got a little lost in the book on exactly what she was saying, so I didn't include it. I'm just kind of briefly talking about it now. If you guys know what I'm talking about and you know more, please elaborate. The way she was talking about it, I couldn't really follow that well in the book. But basically, I think people just think it's not them because they would have done it together. And then I think they're thinking in their alibi or in their confessions, they would have been like, well, he wasn't with me that night, so that's why he's confessing or something like that. But maybe there are people who still believe that, but
I just didn't know, since like there were two profiles. Yeah. I mean, I agree. Like, I don't think that these 4 men were involved at all. I just didn't know if that was an argument that some people had because of the 2 different profiles.
I feel like it was whatever the 2 men in the yogurt shop that night were, because everyone has come forward who was in the yogurt. Like they were like literally every single person in that yogurt shop came forward and gave a statement except these 2 men. There's no like record of them. Like, why aren't they coming forward? People are seeing them not eating. People kind of got weird vibes from them. So it's like, who were they and what did they do? Kind of thing.
So again, another plug for upload your DNA to GEDmatch,
Mm-hmm.
so we can help solve some of these unsolved cases that have been unsolved for so long. That is so frustrating when you know there's DNA, you just don't have anyone to match it to because that person either hasn't committed another crime, hasn't been caught for committing another crime, of course could be dead at this point, but would still give the families some sort of closure to know at least who did it. And
and maybe the incomplete DNA guy is like a super big serial person whose DNA we just don't have enough, and he recruited somebody else and he never did anything else, and that's why we don't have, you know what I mean? It's like, who it's such a big crime for it to be your first time. But
yeah, very true. Just, I mean, so tragic. And again, what these poor girls went through.
Yeah, Amy's parents, like clips from like news clips were shown of them, and it was just absolutely heartbreaking seeing them just kind of and Sonora talked about it on the episode, and it's rough.
And also hope that today we don't have two teenage girls closing down their work
a
alone.
yogurt shop.
Like let's have an adult present, please.
Yeah. Might be beneficial.
That being said, Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
So
based on Courtney's face, we have very similar perks of the week.
Oh God. My perk of the week, I'm again just gonna do a general thing. And that is that it's spooky season. And I like spooky season. And Kevin and I watched Friday the 13th, the final chapter tonight after I got home. So we like to just try and watch scary movies when we can. It's also football season, which sucks for me because then Thursday through Monday is taken up. And if you say there's only NFL games on Thursdays, Sundays, and Mondays, well, you haven't met my husband, who then fills the rest of the days with college football. So
exactly.
It's hard life. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. But no, so I'm just excited for Halloween. Like, I'm excited to get the costumes together. I'm excited for like Halloween parties coming up, and just, I got my ghost outside. I'm just excited. I just like Halloween. I like the vibes. All black everything fits with my soul. So
I also have to share that Millie is like super into like the Halloween decorations and like all the like spooky stuff. There's a Miss Rachel episode that she loves where she sings, like, it's like the Wheels on the Bus, but it's like the spooky town, and so they have like a witch and a ghost, and so she's singing that all of the time. And then today we were driving back home from getting dinner, and we passed a house that had like a ton of decorations, and it was so funny. She got so excited, like she literally couldn't even like get her words out, and she's like, I see all the Halloween, all the, and she just couldn't. And then she finally said, all the pumpkin patches. She just like couldn't like figure out what it's called. Yeah. Like she's like, it's the spooky stuff, but I don't know what it's called. It's the pumpkin patches. And there was no pumpkins. It was just like ghosts and skeletons and everything. But
I need to see, because I heard a rumor that the Christmas house also does Halloween.
Oh, that's exciting.
So I need to go see. Anyone who doesn't know the Christmas house, there's a house by my parents' house that is the most amount of Christmas decorations I've ever seen in my fucking life. It is beyond tacky, and I love every inch of it.
So exciting.
Anyway, that's my perk of the week. I know it's kind of not exciting. I know there's so many things in my life to be thankful for. Some days when you're really tired, it's just kind of hard to come up with an exact one. So yeah, that's my perk of the week. Jacqueline, what's your perk of the week?
Okay, so you're gonna laugh at me. Okay, it's a very roundabout perk of the week, so just bear with me for like just a second. Yeah, it's not that bad. But so it's definitely been one of those weeks, like not a terrible week, just a very busy week, and like I haven't like done anything to like share or whatever. And I was talking to Andrew about it when we were on the way to get dinner, and I'm like, I haven't even picked up my book that I started in Orlando when we were at CrimeCon. I haven't watched any TV that's not related to like podcast research. Like I got nothing to share. Okay. Just absolutely nothing. And so we were talking about, I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm going to talk about for my perk of the week. And I explained to him that I can't do preemptive perk of the weeks because that's a jinx. Yeah. And so we went to Chick-fil-A for dinner, and last time we went, I was like, oh, I really want to try their like honey pepper pimento sandwich, but I was kind of nervous, so I didn't try it. So when we pulled up today, he's like, "Are you gonna try it this time?" And I was like, "I don't know." And he was like, "Jacqueline, you need a perk of the week. So like, I don't know what else you're gonna come up with in the next like 2 hours." And I was like, "You're right. You're right." So I got it, and it was not great. It was not a perk of the week.
I've heard it's amazing.
It wasn't terrible. But I mean, I ate the whole thing, but I probably would not order it again. But my perk of the week is that I try something new.
There you go.
Finally,
you went to Satan's Chicken and tried something new. And yes, I know people call it the Lord's Chicken. I call it the Satan's Chicken.
our fast food options are kind of limited in this area, so But
you live on Broadway. It has everything. You live on. I'll bleep that part out.
No, the fast food options that I would like to eat are not fast food, like easy pickup is what I'm trying to say. Like,
I can see that.
They also have mac and cheese, which obviously my 2-year-old loves, so that's always a win.
Yeah.
But
no, I've heard it's good. I was kind of surprised you said you ordered it since it has jalapenos on it.
Yeah, like I said, it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't like super spicy. Like it was, it's just a little spicy, but it's also very messy. It's very runny. I expected it to be like a little thicker pimento,
Yeah.
I guess the
Things
honey
aren't fun when they're too messy.
Yeah. It's a very sticky sandwich.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I've kind of been the same way. I started a book that's too early for me to like give as a perk of the week. My last book was good, but not really perk of the week of it worthy. And I've just been watching Vanderpump Rules, and that was my perk of the week. Like 4 months ago, which it was funny. I was watching Vanderpump Rules in my hotel room in Kentucky, and 2 of the people were getting married in Kentucky.
Wow, that's crazy.
So on the way home, I stopped at the Kentucky Castle so I could see where they got married. It was kind of on my way.
Love it.
So
Love
yeah,
it.
that's
the
life.
lives we're living this week, So as always, let us know what your perk of the week is. Let us know your thoughts on this case. If you've uploaded your DNA,
and I'm getting sweaty. So patreon.com/caffeinated crimes. Be sure and sign up. Be like Christina, sign up. Yes. We have a bunch of perks there. We have coming on 40 bonus episodes. You can get a pin and sticker, Discord access, just all ad-free episodes, a lot of perks. And if you could give us 5 stars on Apple, Spotify, wherever you can give stars or likes, it's exciting. But in the meantime, go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.